My paranormal experiences were first experienced when I started working professionally. I was working with an HVAC company, and we've done residential work. We also do commercial work. One of the commercial jobs I was working with the particular company, we did work at a steel mill. Now I'm from Pennsylvania, so anybody from Pennsylvania would know the Fairless Hills steel plant. They used to make a lot of steel for when Pennsylvania was a popular steel producer. A lot of people would remember Bethlehem Steel. So they made a lot of steel in Pennsylvania. Basically, nowadays, they just do galvanized sheet metal, but it used to be a very active plant with thousands upon thousands of employees on a multi-mile complex. So they had their own fire department, they had their own hospital, and we worked on various equipment in the plant. Now they just use one plant to basically produce sheet metal, steel, galvanized steel for cars. But they still use some of the facilities. We were working on a hospital. The hospital's not really in use, but they were using it for administrative purposes. We were in the basement of the hospital. And in the basement of the hospital, they had an air handler. An air handler is basically a big blower that moves air through the system and allows cooling to occur. Also, there were other instruments and hydronic systems in the basement, but they hadn't been used for 20 years. The only thing that was operational down there was the air handler. So I'm out down there with my friend, the senior mechanic, Ernie. He's going over the blower, looking at it, and I'm just sort of like looking around the basement, looking at the various rusting equipment. And I look over at like a water valve that hadn't been used in 10 years. And standing there is a man. He's a white man. He's got a hard hat on. He's got a safety vest on. He's got a clipboard in his hand. He's actually looking like he's inspecting the valve that's right there. He has a mustache. I mean, I could still see his face. I look at him. He looks at me. I nod. I turn to my the senior mechanic. I say, Ernie, we're not alone down here. As soon as we both turn around, the man's gone. I would say only about 3 or 4 seconds went by between me telling Ernie and us looking behind. There was no way he could have just walked out. There was a corrugated staircase that went up that was about 50 feet long, and you could not just go up without making a sound. And all the other rooms were pitch black and dark. There was just nowhere to go. I have a little ghost hunting experience, so we tried to debunk it, but there was just no way. So that was a full body apparition, the only time I ever saw anything. And given that the accidents and everything else that happened at the hospital, it's just, I can't explain what had happened. The next experience happened with another company. I was doing residential, and this would be years later. The real estate company wanted us to do a heating inspection on a house. Usually when they're selling a house, they want us to inspect the heating and air conditioning equipment to make sure that it's up and running, so when they sell the house, that they can tell the buyers that, yes, the equipment's working, it's functional, and it increases the value of the house. So no one was home. I went down into the basement and I started my inspection. While I'm down there in the basement, I hear footsteps coming from the upper floor. I assumed the realtor came in and saw my truck outside, came in and was just wondering. So I said, yes, I'm in the basement. I didn't hear anything, so I went to go upstairs and look, and no one was there. It sounded like someone was walking around above me. After that, I went down into the basement and finished the inspection on the heater. The problem was that when I went back upstairs to gather my tools and leave, I felt an ominous presence on the second floor. But I felt it was just better to leave the building, so I did. But when I contacted dispatch to let them know, I asked them, was there anything I should know about this house? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I heard some unusual noises. Did something happen here? And they told me the client's mother used to live in the house and that she had passed away in the house and that the client talked with the realtor and that's why they wanted the equipment inspected. And I'm like, oh, okay, that explains it. And then I moved on. The last experience I had was at a house we bought, and it was a brand new construction. The problem was the lot which it was built on was between other row homes, and it hadn't been used in 80 years. It was just an empty lot. I was told that it was once part of a school, but I could never confirm that, and that a shooting had occurred up the street. We put in an alarm system in the house because the neighborhood was sketchy. We had various motion sensors, one on the top of the stairs, one downstairs. What would happen would be we would be out of the house and we would get a call from the alarm company that the upstairs motion sensor tripped, and the police came out to the house. They found nothing. This would occur multiple times. And we checked to see if it was an insect or anything else. There was nothing that could have caused that sensor to trip. We had it replaced. We thought it was a defective sensor, and yet it continued to happen. The other things that would occur in the house was that when I would be playing my video games, I would have a controller on a table. I would walk into the next room. Next thing I would notice is that my controller bounced from the middle of the table onto the middle of the floor. Now, even though it was a vibrating type controller, it could vibrate on the table, but it wouldn't bounce. And it literally flew off the table onto the middle of the floor. Other things would occur. We would be watching TV, and you would hear various dishes in the sink move. Forks moving and falling, or dishes falling off the counter, but no ominous feelings or anything else. Another thing that occurred, I had a flashlight on top of the TV. I'm watching TV at night, the lights are off. Next thing I know, the flashlight jumps off the top of the TV and lands on the floor. I tried to debunk it by rolling it off to see it would fall, but if I did, it would fall straight down. It wouldn't just jump off the table and land on the floor. Eventually, we would move from the house, and my wife would tell me that when we'd moved to our new house, she had felt a dark cloud had suddenly lifted. She had felt that there was something wrong with the house. Even though we had those minor disturbances occur, we never felt anything ominous. And those are the paranormal experiences I had experienced.
My paranormal experiences happen so often that they're almost normal to me. A few years ago, I was living with a couple roommates. I had gotten home from work, and as usual, we would just kind of hang out and do our own thing. I didn't think of it at the time, but it was sort of strange that we all got tired at the same time, so we all decided to go to bed. Nothing real unusual, and in the middle of the night, I had woken up. There was this haze. I didn't feel right, and I knew that something was wrong. So I thought to myself, something's not right. I need to wake up Clayton, and that's my partner. As soon as I thought that, I went to extend my arms, try to, move to get up to turn over, and my arms wouldn't work, and I couldn't speak. The only thing I could do really was turn. So I just started turning over and over, like kind of like a tumbler, in attempts to try to wake him up. It was so strange. I didn't know what was going on. I questioned it if I had been drugged or something. After a minute, I got real tired. I remember fading out and fading back in, and I was awake for, it felt like 4 hours, but it turns out we had had a carbon monoxide leak. I still had no idea what was going on. Just in the midst of everything, there was like a jolt. I could see myself from the third person view, and just thought that was really weird. I didn't know if I was dreaming or what was going on. Then there was a bright white flash of light that kind of disassociated me from all of it. And in the midst of suffocating and panicking, that bright white flash happened, and immediately I felt so calm, so peaceful, pure joy, the happiest I have ever been, and giggling. It was so strange, and I could, that bright white flash brought me to being above the clouds, looking out, and the landscape was the closest thing that I can relate it to would be if anyone's ever played Skyrim. That beautiful green rolling landscape. It was gorgeous. And I looked down to my hands and what I had been doing, and I was sitting on the back of a gigantic dragon, and I could feel the scales. Its scales were so black and like an iridescent blue that faded into kind of an iridescent green. It was just ginormous, but I could feel the wind on my face, in my hair. I could see below me. The dragon was communicating to me, but not really in a language. If it was a language, it wasn't really anything that I can articulate or make out. It was more of a low grumble that was more felt, and I could communicate back with it. I definitely understood what it was conveying to me. We had landed, and he told me that I needed to go back. And I could tell that however the relationship was, he was definitely my protector, my guardian, that he wanted the best for me and was a companion of sorts. But he told me, even though I want you to stay and you don't want to go, you need to return. I started to object, and I didn't want to go back. And he kind of forced me, and it felt kind of like a push, and I guess came back. I guess settled into my body again. I woke up and looked around, and my boyfriend was on my side in attempts, I'm guessing, to, revive me. He had to kind of pick me up. All I can really remember after that is frantically looking for my cat, Nix. And, I can't leave her. I can't leave her. I kind of stumbled out the door in my blanket, and that was the end of that, or so I thought. We had gotten away from the house. Everything had been cleared up. But when we returned, I thought the strangest part of the experience was for about a week after that, things were very, very odd. I could look at people and their faces would change and morph. I went to look in the mirror, and it seemed that my face would take shape, morph into different people. It took me aback. I didn't really know how to take that. I could talk to people and, watch their entire being morph and change before my eyes. My roommate said that I would be standing there talking to someone, and to his perception, there was no one there, but I could see people. I walked into the living room and it took shape. It was, I think, an England home with cars passing in the window. The front door was very elaborate and regal. It opened and there were gentlemen walking alongside the street with top hats and umbrellas. And I looked to the other side of the room and there was a man in a straw hat that was tending a farm. It was almost like I could not tell where the veil stopped and ended, that I kind of just ebbed between the two. It was very strange, in the least. So my family owns a small farm. It's been there since 1823, I believe. My great grandfather owned it, started it from a plot of land, and we've lived there ever since. There is, we call it the old farmhouse. It was the original building that he had built when he first moved there. Since then, they've sold that house off and just kept the original piece of land. We've had a couple various people move in and out of the house over the years. It's always been very strange that when a family moves in, they start experiencing strange things. If anyone's invited over, the guest will have a certain dream. I've talked to these people separately, and they, without knowing the other people have already had the same dream, they recreate it for me almost exact to the T. And while I've never had it, while someone is telling me about it, I can see it play out in my mind. And it's always, they're sitting at a picnic table with a small young girl that's coloring. They're just kind of making small conversation with this young girl, and the cellar doors swing open and this strange creature crawls out towards you. It resembles an almost hairless bear, but it seems more like a cat. And it's very menacing. It's very intent on getting out. And I'm not sure what its intent is, but after it starts, it gets midway to you, the dream stops usually. Everyone has had this same exact dream. The manner in which it happens is very timely. It's always this happens, then this happens, and this happens. And after a person has that dream, there's usually a string of suicides in the area. I don't know if that's just an odd coincidence, but after so many times, it can't be. Now, whatever it is, it seems to be malicious, but each family that lives in the house or decides to move in, if they have any men in the house, the men normally face some type of mysterious end. For as long as it's been sold, no men have been able to live in the house for over 6 months. One of the older gentlemen that moved in about 15 years ago lived there for maybe 3 months, and mysteriously his oxygen concentrator combusted, and it was only him left in a heaping pile of ash. There's just really been no explanation for it. Now, I am the type of person that I'm not really intimidated by much, especially after my near-death experience. nothing really can frighten me that badly anymore. So naturally, I kind of antagonized it, whatever this thing may be, and taunted it a little bit, mostly because this farm is my grandparents'. If there is anything that I love more in this world, it is my grandparents. So this was kind of an loose attempt at being the savior of the day to get it away from them, whatever it would have been, because I would rather it follow me around instead of, lurking in the shadows close to my family. From what I believe and all the things occurring up to that point, this, whatever it was, had followed me. There was no doubt that it had followed me. In the night, it would hurt my ears that this thing screamed, just howled. I could sense that this thing was there, just kind of lurking. I had gone out one night. It was late. I can't really remember what I was doing. I think I might have been checking my car or something. And I looked up. My eyes were drawn to the tree line for some reason. And amongst the rest of the foliage, I guess, was this thing. It was as black could be. It Vanta black. And like I said, I'm not scared of much, but this thing terrified me. It looked through me. I was frozen. I think I almost peed myself. I stood there looking at it, trying not to show any type of fear or intimidation. After a minute, I just kind of swiftly went back into the house. But this thing was scary. After a while, things were settled. I figured out how to be rid of it, but we're still kind of unsure as to what it is. As for the farm and the original farmhouse, a new family has recently moved in, and the father is still avidly in the picture. It's been almost 2 years. They live a happy life in the farmhouse. There's never been any trouble. When people visit, they don't see anything lurking or feeling that something's looking over their shoulder. So I do think that whatever I did helped out the land and evicted it. So if nothing else, it's positive. Growing up, I was raised in the valleys of Rogues Hollow. We lived on top of one of northeastern Ohio's first coal mine in the valley that people commonly know as Rogues Hollow. I was within walking distance of Crybaby Bridge. Some people referred to it long ago as, I think it was Bandits Valley, something to that nature. But we had connections to the house that my cousin's ex-husband was originally raised in the house. His adopted family was obviously very dysfunctional. His mother and father built the house themselves, I believe, and later on down the road, his adopted mom was terminally ill with cancer. The father had decided to leave them while she was sick and run off with a lover. After she had passed, he returned to the house to live there and lived out the rest of his days just being in the house. That's how my grandparents bought it for so cheap, and we eventually moved in. But throughout the course of the time that we lived there, things were rarely calm, and things got more active as time passed. The mother was, to me, very, very sweet. I had experienced her a couple times. waking up and rolling over and looking at the headboard, I would see her, and I saw her in the mirror. And, she was a beautiful woman with long orange hair and a white nightgown. She was beautiful. She was just sad. No wonder why, but I was very calm with her. I had no problem with it. Everyone else in the house did, because they didn't really know how to take her, I guess. My stepmother was terrified. At 6:00 in the morning, every morning, the bed would start to kind of bump or feel like it would move. She couldn't stay in the house by herself anymore. I actually started to feel slightly more calm with her presence, just because I felt that she was very sad. She didn't know what to do or how to move on from that, and that's very reasonable. There was other things that would happen, just not really anything that notable. Doors would close on their own. Really, where we lived, those things happened so often and so frequently, you really do become acclimated to it. It doesn't seem like it's abnormal. It's very, very normal. I've talked to people that have not been from the area, and they come out with wide eyes and shaking. And how do you live with that? I truthfully question that. What do you mean? The spirits, the paranormal, the weird stuff that happens. I'm like, yes, that's just how it is. I've had people describe it to me as living under the power lines, in a sense, that you really just get accustomed to it. And it's kind of desensitizing. When I was probably a preteen, maybe 10 or 11, we had gotten really interested in the paranormal. So we meaning me and my best friend at the time, had made our own Ouija board. We saw it on TV and felt that there was something going on. So we decided to make one and try to talk to it or whatever. I was the one who drew it. I used a hemp necklace that I had at the time to attempt to communicate with it. Granted, I shouldn't have. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I definitely knew more than my friend. We both decided that I should be the one who led this endeavor. We had lit candles, sat on the floor, cross-legged, across from each other, with this makeshift board in the middle. I had asked it its name, and for me, it spelled out Gretchen. I asked her how old she was. She said she was 53. It kind of conveyed that she was still here because she was searching for her children, that she wanted to communicate with them, or that something had happened and she lost contact with them. For a second, I felt some sense of sympathy, but immediately was skeptical and had a couple second thoughts. My friend, however, wanted immediately to rush to her side and, be the savior of the day, to help this woman reconnect with her children. And she took it at face value and no questions asked. I hesitated, thought this is not a good idea. And I think the hesitation before, I said goodbye was enough to convey that I wasn't willing to be cooperative and doubted their story or whatever it was. Right a millisecond before I said goodbye, both of my candles were mysteriously knocked over and lit the carpet on fire. That reinforced why I shouldn't have helped her, I think, because I don't really think that it was a her. I don't think that whoever that was in good intention. I feel that she was a very good actor in what she wanted to accomplish, that helping her would aid in getting something from us that we weren't intent on just giving out. After that, I kind of get the feeling that something was there, but it didn't really, I guess, mess with me all that much after that. But she became very mean and aggressive afterwards. I don't know if it was just a coincidence or whatever, but maybe it had its influences on her that I clearly wasn't intent on giving it. That is why I don't really advocate for trying to reach that other world, I guess, like in that manner, because it was very convincing. This was a woman that needed our help, and it just went off of feeling that we shouldn't help her.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.